Good morning. So glad to see everybody here on this cool winter morning. And here we are for our first meeting of 2023. So good to see each and every one of you. And so glad to be here at the State Bar building. You know, the State Bar of Texas does such an excellent job for all of us as attorneys and as judges, and we so appreciate what they do. For those of you who may not know, that the bar has bought some new property and it's going to be developing that property into even nicer facilities like this that we can enjoy. So I know that we all share our appreciation for the wonderful work that the bar does. So we all know that the child welfare system is shifting and evolving every day. We all see it in our cases, in our work, and certainly in the newspapers. And we provide, of course, a forum for civil discourse on these pressing issues, always remembering that we are aimed towards the third branch of government, the judiciary, and making sure that our rules, our procedures, our decision-making is all done in accordance with the rule of law, and that we make sure that that is promulgated in a way that it should be, because of course we are here to support the third branch of government, attorneys, and the judiciary in doing this very, very important work. We appreciate you spending your time as always. We know that it's very difficult for you to get here. Some of you come from far parts of the Texas, Judge Ferguson and others. And we really appreciate the efforts that you make to be here and to offer your wonderful expertise in this critical area of the law. We're going to have some robust discussions, I believe, today, very important discussions. We've planned several presentations that we hope will provide a clearer vision of how the system functions today and where we need to go in terms of collaborating with each other. Again, always remembering that the goal is to assist the third branch of government in making sure that our children are protected, that our families are protected by the court system. I encourage each of you to be actively engaged, as always. Those of you who have seen me chair for a while now know that I encourage it, and I also participate in it. So we really appreciate your doing that as well, as you always do. So without any further ado, again, thank you for being here. Thank you for all the wonderful contributions you make to this very, very important area of the law. And please know, on behalf of the court, there's no area of the law that the court takes more seriously, because there is no area of the law that's more serious in terms of the jurisprudence of the state of Texas. So thank you. And with that, my wonderful colleague, Justice Rebecca Huddle.
Good morning, and thank you to everyone for making time to be here and devote your Friday to this meeting. I'm so excited about our presentations today. I think I am going to learn a lot, absorb a lot. I hope you will too, and I hope you will share your expertise with everyone here today. There's certainly a lot going on. We had a very strange incident on the Capitol grounds last night. All is well now. Someone crashed into the fence on the Capitol grounds last night. All is well. We're assured everything is fine this morning. But in addition to that, there are many things going on. The 88th legislature is in session, and we expect they'll have some new laws, some changes to the law affecting the family code as it relates to child welfare. We all know, probably all of us know, there's an ongoing federal lawsuit. There's also a new leadership team at DFPS. And there are new rules regarding remote proceedings that we think will have an effect on how our judges run our child welfare cases and in all cases. So very many things in flux. We have an dynamic environment. Sometimes I feel like it's hard to keep up with all the things that are changing, but another and perhaps better way to look at it is the changes present opportunities for improvement, continuous improvement, which is what we're after with respect to the system and how it deals with Texas families. So I'm grateful to have the benefit of so many very expert folks in the room to navigate all of these new and changing dynamics. So thanks for being here again. Just a couple of housekeeping matters about how we'll run the meeting. There are no breaks other than lunch. If you need a personal break, please feel free to take it. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube, and shuffling of papers at your desk can be picked up by the mics in the ceiling. So please be mindful of that. Please fill out your match forms as you have time. This is required by the Federal Court Improvement Program grant. Allowable travel expenses, including parking, can be reimbursed by the commission. There are printed reimbursement forms available, or you can access the forms on the Children's Commission website if that's easy for you after the meeting. Finally, collaborative council members. If you would like to provide an update toward the end of the meeting, you're encouraged to submit a card so that we know to call on you. And you can provide it to the commission staff over the lunch break if you'd like to share some update or information with us. So with that, I'll thank you again for helping us make the meeting run smoothly today, and I'll welcome you and say how glad I am to see everyone in the room.
Thank you so much, Justice Huddle. I did just want to briefly mention the rules that Justice Huddle just alluded to, because they just came out a couple of weeks ago, and we have new rule, Texas Rule of Civil Procedure 21D and 500.10, and then we have amendments to Rule 500.2, 501.4 and 505.1. And those rules are meant because we have issued, yes, our last emergency order, and we actually had that in the title. It is the last emergency order. We kept them in effect because we wanted courts to have the authority to still be able to do things virtually when appropriate. So please refer to those rules. We now have a rule that will assist courts and judges and attorneys in doing things virtually when appropriate, and realize that the only real restriction is there'll be no jury trials absent agreement of the parties. So refer to those. Okay, we have a few membership changes. I invite you to look at tab 1, page 9 in the PDF of the meeting notebook. This document includes commission, committee, and collaborative council memberships, as well as staff. And I would just like to highlight a few for everyone today. So we have Judge Thomas Stuckey, who is now the chair of the Legal Practice and Process Committee, one of our 4 standing committees. This position was previously held by Judge Huffstedler, who has retired from the bench and completed his term as commissioner. Judge Stuckey will also be a member of the Children's Commission Executive Committee. Judge Stuckey, you've always been so helpful in everything we've asked you to do. You never say no, you always say yes. We put too much on you, but you know what they say, when you want somebody to get something done, you pick the busiest people, because that is who gets things done. So thank you very, very much for your wonderful leadership and your support of this very, very important thing that we all engage in. Mary Christine Reed, she has left her position as director of the Foster Youth Justice Project. She is now the Economic and Social Justice Group Coordinator for TRLA and can no longer serve on the Systems Improvement Committee or the Collaborative Council. She was a critical partner in numerous Children's Commission initiatives and projects since 2011. This is a total of 12 years of collaboration and partnership with the commission, ranging from work groups on education, parent resources, legal representation. She provided unparalleled leadership as a champion for older youth aging out of foster care. She'll be greatly missed, and we have sent her a certificate in recognition to acknowledge her long-standing service. So let's please extend our appreciation to Ms. Reed. Fortunately, Sarah Worthington took the helm at the Foster Youth Justice Project, and she's going to take Ms. Reed's place on the Systems Improvement Committee and Collaborative Council. Where is Sarah? There she is. Thank you so much. We look forward to continuing to work with Ms. Worthington, who is a longtime partner and accomplished advocate for youth and youth adults in foster care. So thank you very, very much for stepping up. We really appreciate it. Trish Thomas is no longer in the Office of Community-Based Care Transition, and as such, she will no longer serve on the Collaborative Council. So please join me one more time in thanking all of these individuals. So it was our plan to welcome the new DFPS executive team to this meeting. However, unfortunately, the Senate Finance Committee was rescheduled due to the bad weather we had last week, and this caused a conflict that they were not able to be here with today. But we certainly look forward to introducing them to all of you and to us as well. I really look forward to getting to know them because we have a lot of changes going on over there. So thank you all so much for being here, and we certainly appreciate our guests for being here today. Thank you. Justice Huddle.
Yeah, so looking backward for just a moment before we launch into our first substantive presentation, I wanted to ask, has anyone, I know that each of you had the opportunity to review the minutes of the meeting from November 4th, and I'm going to assemble votes orally. Does anyone have any corrections to the minutes? Okay, do I have a motion to adopt the minutes of the November 4th, sorry, 2022 meeting? And a second. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? The meeting minutes are adopted. And now, my pleasure to get to a very meaningful, very special part of the meeting this morning. At our annual February commission meeting, we reserve time on our agenda to hear from voices of individuals with lived experience in the child welfare system. And the goal of this, of course, is to stay grounded and to really leave top of mind and in the front of our memories why it is that we do this work that we all do, that we all care very deeply about. It also helps us stay attuned to innovations, improvements, where things have gone right and where there is still room for improvement. So the next presentation will touch on both of these things. We know the system is moving upstream to try to keep families safely together when that's possible, rather than setting families down a path toward termination. And there are burgeoning efforts in Houston, in Waco, and the Trolla service area to provide early legal representation to families earlier in the process. So I'm pleased today to introduce our two speakers who will address the power of early legal representation to help level the playing field for families. Cindy Dyer first. Cindy is over here in this part of the room, is the director of the Family Defense Project at Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid. The project provides defense during investigations, administrative reviews, family-based safety services, court-ordered services, or removal cases. Welcome, Cindy. Next, Mariah, seated to Cindy's left, if you're on this side of the table, is a former client and parent with lived experience in the child welfare system. She traveled a long distance today to get here and share her story with us. And I applaud her willingness to present to us today to further the goal, hopefully, that we all share, which is to make the system better. Folks, this is what courage looks like. So please welcome both of our speakers.
Thank you all for having us. Again, I'm Cindy Dyer. I'm with the Family Defense Project, which is a project out of Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid. We go by TRALA for short. As you just heard, Sarah Worthington and the Foster Youth Justice Project are also housed out of TRALA. So we have two separate CPS projects that we cover. We are one of the 3 legal aid service providers, LSC providers in the state of Texas. We cover South and Central Texas. So basically our service area runs from El Paso through this area, Austin and Wilco, all the way over to Corpus and South. So we see a lot of different things happening in our 68 counties. We're going to get to Mariah's case in a minute, but I wanted to lay out a little bit more about early defense work, just for those who aren't familiar with it. This is a national movement that started more than 10 years ago in some states to start providing representation to parents and families at the first time and stage they do meet the department. It's called pre-petition representation, early defense. Models vary widely across both our state and also the nation. We provide representation directly in opposition to the department, but as a legal services provider, we also can provide general civil legal services to try to sort the root of the issue that caused department involvement, because our goal is to prevent removals of all of our clients' children, and also to ensure no future intervention if possible by the department. Briefly, as far as numbers, just to show why representation at this stage is important. We can see from the department's 2021 data card for that fiscal year, there are more than 262,000 children who are alleged victims of abuse and neglect. Only about a quarter of those were substantiated, and of that number, about 13,000 children were removed from the home. What I'm sharing that for is because so many of the legislative efforts over the last few sessions, the lawsuit reform, the news articles, they all focus on children in care, right? Chapter 262 and 264 cases and children in permanent custody of the department. But what that does is skips over the tens of thousands of families who are encountering the department at this stage. During either an investigation or family-based safety services, there is virtually no oversight in the field. And it is important that parents have the access to attorneys to either represent them or explain what is going on. You will hear Mariah's story. I will let you know our numbers in a second and say we are early in this project. So I'm not at the stage where I'm offering patterns of what we're seeing, right? I'm not able to quantify our data and say this is happening in this specific region. Right now, we're just providing representation and collecting information. So her story, when you will hear about her experience, we've heard stories, many stories like hers before, but it's not everyone's experience. And we're not here to say this is happening in every single case that we're providing representation on. It's important to understand what we're providing representation for. And to do that, it's important to understand that every family is unique and their legal needs are unique. Sometimes parents just want to have advice to understand who this person is at their door. Sometimes parents are afraid and just need to understand what their rights are. But sometimes the department is abusing its power and they need representation for that. The 3 early defense programs in Texas, the first started in July of 2020, and that is the Foster Care Advocacy Center based out of Houston. As of last month, they report helping keep 106 children out of the child welfare system. The second early defense project is McLennan County Parent Advocacy Project. They've operated since November of 2021 in the Waco area. They received startup funding from Casey Family Programs. And as of last month, they represented over 90 families. And kept those families out of the child welfare system. We officially opened in June of 2021. We've handled 141 cases, and that includes our current cases that are open right now. And that's across our 68 county service area. I will tell you that that does include a handful of court cases where we've substituted in for court-appointed attorneys. It includes a handful of ARIFs and SOA due process hearings, a couple reinstatements, but the rest are all representation during or advice during FBSS or investigations. All right, so we're gonna get to Mariah's story. Mariah, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you live? How many kids do you have? And what's your current occupation?
I currently live in Fort Walton, Texas. I'm from Houston, but I've been living there for about 5 years. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I have 5 children.
I'm sorry, could you speak up a little bit, please? Because we really couldn't hear anything you said.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Yes, I currently live in Fort Lavaca, Texas, but I'm from Houston, Texas. I have 5 children, and I've been a stay-at-home mom for the last almost 6 years.
And are you currently married?
I am currently in the process of a divorce.
And before your case with CPS started in July of 2022, had you ever been involved with CPS before in your life, either as a child or a parent?
No, never.
And before your case started in July of 2022, what was your basic understanding of what CPS was and what they were supposed to do?
Unfortunately, I had heard stories that were not pleasant about CPS, and I'm ashamed to say that I kind of didn't believe it because I had always believed if you were in CPS, you had to have done something to get there. And I just believe that they were there for the welfare of children, that there needed to be a system in place to help children in situations that they shouldn't be in. And that was all I thought about it.
And what happened in your home in the summer of 2022 that resulted in CPS investigating your family?
That summer, there was an incident with my children were roughhousing, and my husband at the time crossed a line between being an angry parent and abusing physical abuse that it's a little difficult. He physically disciplined the children in an entirely inappropriate way. I took my children to the hospital for the incident that was among children, and found out that he had abused them while I was gone. From there, I took the children to the hospital. I talked to the nurse about marks I found on the children at the hospital. And from there, I went home and asked my husband to leave. It got really, really ugly, and I couldn't get him to leave. So I stayed with my children that night, and the next day I went to my counselor and talked to her about what happened and asked for help, asked for support and removing him from our home. From there, we reported to CPS together. We made a plan. We reported to CPS, and I went home from there and waited for CPS.
And so, just to clear this up, had your husband prior to that night ever laid a hand on any of your children from which you're aware?
No, that was the first time, but I had noticed an escalation in his behavior, and his personality had taken a shift over the last year, and that was the peak. That was the turning point for us. That was the first time he had ever done anything like that, but it was enough.
And so, how long after you and your therapist called CPS to make the report did they first show up at your house?
It was almost 2.5 weeks later.
Were you surprised at the length of time it took them to show up?
I was surprised, and I had actually started to believe that they would not intervene without having reported it multiple times, or that maybe one report wasn't enough. And I was trying to figure out another way to get him out of the house because he was not willingly leaving at that time.
And so when CPS established contact with you towards the end of July, what did they request from you?
They requested that I take the children to an interview at the children's shelter the following Monday, and this was on a Friday. So they came to the home, talked to us, and then asked me to meet with the children the next Monday, leaving us with my husband at the time for the weekend as well.
And did you willingly take the children to meet the CPS and the law enforcement detective?
Absolutely.
And did the detective at that meeting offer to help you have your husband leave the home?
Yes, I actually asked for help. They asked what I wanted, and I asked for support. I said that I needed help. I needed somebody to help me get him out of the home. And from there, the detective of my town offered to come with me and escort him off the property. And from there, the CPS investigator followed us, and we devised a safety plan once he had left.
And so did your husband resist leaving the home when the detective showed up?
No. From there, he realized what was going on, and he left early.
And since that day, has your husband ever returned to the home or attempted to return to the home?
No.
When did you make the decision to seek a divorce from your husband?
The night that he hurt my children.
Have you ever wavered from that?
No.
Had you actually applied with legal aid for help with the divorce at the end of summer 2022?
Yes.
And you didn't get an attorney until December for the divorce, right?
Correct.
Had you also on your own after this incident sought custody with the Attorney General's office in August?
Yes,
And the whole time, did you let CPS know what your plan was?
yes, I did.
Did you ever change that plan?
No.
And did the CPS investigator ask you to get a protective order against your husband?
No, the CPS investigator never mentioned it. It was actually offered to me by the detective in my town. He was very helpful. He's the same detective that escorted my husband out. He had called me and offered it as an option and told me that he was there to support me if I needed that. At that time, I had decided, my husband had left willingly. We had discussed divorce. We had agreed I was going to have sole custody of the children, and he agreed that he needed help. He needed to take parenting classes and anger management, and he had a long way to go, and he was not going to be around the children until he could figure that out. And so at the time I had, well, it never changed, but I had decided that it would not be in the best interest of my children to seek a protective order against my husband. I mean, statistically, children of incarcerated parents are more likely to become incarcerated in their lifetime as well. And losing that spousal support of having him serve time, it just didn't seem like it was necessary or in the best interest of anyone in my family. So we decided not to do that. I had discussed it with our CPS investigator and let her know that I had thought about it. And then I had updated her and let her know that I decided not to do it as well. And from there, she was on board with what I wanted, and the issue wasn't an issue.
And so at the end of that investigation, were you asked to do or offered family-based safety services?
I wasn't exactly asked to do it. It more felt like it was pitched to me, it was offered to me. And I felt like I had nothing to lose. Turns out I kind of had everything to lose, but I had no idea. I've never been in a situation like this. The way family-based services was offered to me was that I had just lost my husband. And I hadn't expected anything like that to happen. I'd been a stay-at-home mother for 5 years. And I needed support. I needed a village, and that's what I thought I was getting. I thought that going into family-based services would be the community that I was looking for. I was offered free daycare, help paying bill support, bill paying, and other services that actually never played out. They never happened. And
Did they explain to you how many times in family-based safety services they'd be coming by your house?
no, it was never discussed what that was going to look like for me. But since I had only met with the investigator one time at my home, in the 2 months that was going on, I kind of had assumed it would be along the same time frame, maybe once a month or so. And it was a lot more frequently, and the intensity was a lot different. It ended up being a little bit traumatic for my children to have somebody showing up weekly and investigating the home, looking through everything. And it was not what I had anticipated, and there's no way anybody could be prepared for that.
Did you ever get daycare or any other financial assistance?
No, when I had asked for them from my family-based services manager, a caseworker, he printed out a sheet for me that was how to apply for food stamps, but that was it. That was all I got.
And so did the investigator have you sign a safety plan that made you the visitation supervisor for
Yes.
your ex?
Yes.
And they didn't offer you other choices, that was the safety plan, right? Did that safety plan ever change in writing during your FBSS case? But did your FBSS caseworker verbally modify it?
He did. He had mentioned several times what he wanted to do, what his goal was, and he had mentioned he wanted to ease up on the family plan. He wanted to allow holiday visits for my husband because the holidays were approaching. These weren't things that I had asked for or talked about, and I think there was a lot of miscommunication between what I wanted and needed for my family and what my ex-husband was requesting and asking for from him.
Were you trying to reunify with your ex-husband?
No.
Did you want your ex-husband in the home for supervised
I did not
visits?
want him at home.
Did your initial FBSS caseworker ever reference a protective order or request that you get one?
Not once.
How far into your FBSS case were you assigned a new caseworker?
It was 3 months into FBS and about 5 months into my actual case.
So around November of 2022?
Yes.
And how did this new FBSS caseworker treat you during your initial meeting?
Completely different than I had gotten used to being treated. I thought that we were doing very well. I had done everything they asked. I didn't feel like I had anything to hide, and we'd done nothing wrong. When she came into the home, my original FPS case manager brought her to introduce her to us, and it just seemed like right off the bat she came looking for something. She had in mind who I was supposed to be, and was looking for something. She came in. She had kind of. Sorry, words are failing me.
The birthmark?
Yeah, she had at one point grabbed my son, and he was crawling on the floor playing. She had grabbed my son and demanded to know what his birthmark was. I had said that was his birthmark. He was born with that. She demanded to know, have I had it checked out? I said, no, but I'm not concerned with it. He's had it since he's been born, and I'm familiar with birthmarks. And she told me that it didn't matter, and I needed to have it checked out. She'd been in healthcare before that, and it needed to be checked out. And I did have it checked out. It was just a birthmark, but it left me feeling like that was only the beginning of what she was going to be looking for. I think there's a saying like if you go digging, you're going to find dirt. And I was left with the impression that she came with a shovel that day, and she was ready to find something. And I feel like no matter what, she would have eventually tried to find something.
So did she have an issue with you supervising the father's visitation?
She did. She, as soon as she became our case manager, she told us that we were to have no contact with him whatsoever. At the time, he was only showing up for soccer games, and that was the only contact we were having with him. And it worked for us and the children. And
it was according to your safety
It was
plan.
according to our safety plan of me being the monitor, and that changed. And as soon as she said that, and that was verbal for me as well, it was never written. And as soon as she said that, we backed off. I told him he could not come to the games anymore, and he respected that and stopped showing up to the games as well.
And so a couple weeks after she started on your case, was there a point where you lost power at the house?
There was, I did lose power.
For how long?
It was about 4 days.
And where did you stay with the case during that time?
I didn't really have anywhere else to go, so I went to the Harper Children's Alliance, which is a women and children shelter, and they had been working with me. That's where I was going to counseling with my children as well. And they helped me get into a hotel in town, and helped us get into that.
Did you think there was any issue with those arrangements?
No, it wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't, nobody wants to be in that situation, but I was grateful for the support I had, and it came easily, and I didn't think there was anything wrong with that.
But did the caseworker have a problem with your power being out, and what did she say?
She did. When she found out that the power was out, she called me, and I was actually at the shelter at the time when she called, and she called demanding to know where my children were. I told her they're at school, and I'm at the Harbor right now, and she had let me know that she would absolutely not allow children to be in a home without power, and that if she found out I had them in a home without power, she would have to remove them. And I assured her that we were absolutely not staying in a home without power, and I was in the process of getting the hotel vouchers from the shelter, and that's where we would be staying that night. I gave her the name and address of where we would be, and yes, that was it.
In this same conversation, did she start making accusations against you about not being a protective mother?
She did. She somehow shifted gears to talk about the protective order that I had declined to get months earlier. She had told me that she needed some concrete evidence that I was going to protect my children. And I had tried to explain that I was voluntarily in the system to protect my children. I had done, in my eyes, everything I could to protect them. And she said she needed something concrete. She needed evidence that I could protect them, or she would have to place them. She said it was in the pattern of women to go back to their abusers, and that without giving her proof that I was divorced or proof that I would protect them with a protective order, she had no reason to believe that I could protect them and would be looking into placing them with another family.
Removing them from your home.
Removing them. She used the words placement.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so did this same caseworker then, without your agreement or permission, schedule you an appointment to get a protective order the next day?
She did. She told me the time and place to be with the same detective that had been so helpful with me in the past, and asked me to be there the next day at that time
Did you feel like you had to go to that?
Oh, absolutely. I did not feel like that was a choice. I felt like that is one more thing I had to do. I wasn't happy about it. And I was a little disappointed that that was the route that we were going to have to take. But I was willing to do anything that I needed to for my children.
Did you feel like if you didn't go get that protective order, they were gonna remove your children from your home?
I not only felt like it, I believed it 100%,
Based on what she said to you?
based on what she said. Yes.
And so what did the detective advise you to do when you met with him?
When I met with him, I told him what had happened, and I had told him that I was really uneasy about it, and he had asked me why I had a change of heart, because it was the same detective I'd worked with. He asked me why I'd had a change of heart, and I had told him, to be honest, I haven't. I just don't know what else to do. I can't risk my children being taken. And he had kind of advised me that nobody can tell me what to do legally. There should be nobody ever trying to force me to make a decision that I don't want to do, and that he really advised that I seek out an attorney before speaking to my caseworker again.
And then did you go straight back to the Harbor Shelter to see if they could help you find a lawyer?
I did. I drove straight back, and I told them what was going on, and they were amazing, and they helped me get into the system, and they got me on the phone with you that same day.
And I picked up your case that day.
Yes.
Okay, so overall, just can you summarize how this experience with this caseworker made you feel?
Horrible. I was terrified. I have never been so scared in my life. It was more terrifying dealing with CPS than I ever felt living at home with an abuser. It was definitely dealing with my ex-husband, it was unpleasant and it was heartbreaking, but it was easy to navigate because it was concrete. But dealing with CPS when not knowing what was going to happen, it was a loss of control. It was the fear of losing my children that I had never felt living in an abusive situation. And that I don't feel like anybody should ever have to feel like that. It was terrifying. Even now, I still fear. I've been in the CPS system. Even if something arbitrary happened, and I had a report happen just because my community is hyper vigilant. They knew that my family's been in an abusive situation. Maybe I had a child show up with a bruise from the park or something, and somebody reported it just to be safe. Knowing that I've been in the system again, they could take my children, and it's terrifying. And I feel like I've always done everything I could to protect them, but in this situation, it's out of my hands. It's in the hands of this system and not me.
And just to be really clear, was there anything that you had changed in that 5 months of CPS involvement at this stage at all from what you were doing initially?
No.
You hadn't changed your plan with your ex. He wasn't stopping by the house. You were not trying to reconcile with him.
No.
Have you ever allowed the father back into the house after the day the detective helped him leave?
No. And he hasn't tried. He never tried to.
Did you ever violate your expired safety plan in the 6 months that you were involved with
No.
CPS? Did you ever tell CPS, any of your caseworkers, anything differently?
No.
And what was your only service during the FBSS case?
Counseling. They offer counseling at the women's shelter, but my children and I had already been seeing a counselor since the previous year when we noticed the shift in my husband's behavior. So we were nothing new.
So you switched counselors when CPS
We
got involved?
switched counselors, and that was all.
And had you immediately signed releases for CPS to speak to both yours and the kids'
The
counselors?
counselors and their pediatrician and the dentist as well.
Okay, and to your knowledge, did any of your caseworkers ever talk to your kids' medical providers or therapists?
They did not, because I asked.
And did you sign releases for your kid's pediatrician at the beginning of the case?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, did CPS ever reach out to that office?
No, they did not.
Why do you suspect that they didn't?
Well, I have 5 children, so we're always at the pediatrician or the dentist, and counseling. I just feel like it's good for everyone. So we were there every week, and I asked if they had heard anything, and we worked with our pediatrician, and nothing had been said. But this family day services manager had gone out of her way to schedule an appointment for early childhood intervention, to have an interview. She said that she was concerned with the development of my 9-month-old at the time, who she had not met. The same 9-month-old that when she was introduced to my family, my previous family-based service manager raved about, and he had told her how amazing that my family was doing, that my child was already walking and speaking, and how ahead she was. And it conflicted with what she knew of my family, what she had been told of my family, and the fact that she had never looked into my family's medical records if she had been truly concerned. So we had to go out of our way to go out of town and do different interviews and things that felt entirely unnecessary. My child actually tested out at 18 months, at 9 months old. So it was kind of nice to see it, but it was entirely unnecessary and felt mean.
How quickly after I became your attorney did your case close? Remember?
It was weeks. It was nothing. It was maybe 3 weeks.
Did having an attorney change anything for you?
It changed everything.
What?
Just having you on the phone calls, on the emails. My case manager backed down. It was almost like she stopped coming at me with the threats. And I think if she had ever had anything that she was actually concerned with me, it wouldn't have closed. It wouldn't have closed that quickly. It just wouldn't have happened. And I think that goes to say a lot about what she was doing with my case. I had mentioned before, trying to fight her. And I think that this particular case manager, this particular individual came into this looking for problems, hoping that, or maybe even just believing that every family was the same in CPS, that because we're in CPS, and honestly, I used to believe the same thing. If you're in CPS, maybe you did something. I believe that she probably had the like mind, and she assumed that there had to be something that I was doing wrong, and she was determined to find something. And having Sam on my side, she backed down. She stopped with the threats and closed out very quickly after that.
What do you actually truly feel like would have happened if you didn't get an attorney?
I feel like eventually she would have found something. Not that I had anything, but even with just the birthmark situation, looking for something, I feel like she would have found an angle at some point. And that was terrifying, walking on eggshells and tiptoes, trying to make sure that I'm doing everything perfectly, which as a parent, you already do that. But to the degree where you are under a microscope, under the thumb of this system, it's incredibly stressful and really scary as well.
And as someone who's gone through this experience with CPS, both alone and then with an attorney for a short bit, why do you think it's important for parents in your situation to have access to legal representation?
Well, I've actually learned that there is an entire language, there's an entire world in this legal world. And unless you are educated in that language, you don't know what is going on. You don't know what any of it means. They can say anything to you and it's just scary. You don't know how to navigate those waters. And even for my ex, I feel like if he had representation and he was the abuser and he admitted to it and he, agreed to take his classes and everything, I feel like if he had representation and I had representation, it would have been so much easier for our entire case. He would have known what to do, what not to do. He could have had somebody on his side telling him, don't go to soccer games. This is where you should meet your kids. This is what you should do if you want to see your kids. He had nothing, I had nothing. And we were just going based off of what these individuals were telling us, and they were all telling us something different.
Is there anything else you wanted to add about your experience?
I don't think so. I hope that's enough, that you see that it's a huge spectrum. I think that there are people that have been on my husband's and my ex-husband's end where they have been an abusive parent, and people who have been on my end where they feel like what they felt was everything possible, and then people in the middle where they never did anything at all. Neither parties or parents, or maybe both, but there's such a spectrum, and everybody can't be treated the same, because unless you are educated in law, you don't stand a chance without representation.
And so I wanted to let everyone know at the end of that the total hours my entire organization spent on Mariah's case, from the moment I took the call from the shelter worker to talking to Mariah, meetings with CPS and their attorney, et cetera, was 9.2 hours. So we got this dealt with in fewer than 10 hours. And it was a power struggle, because doing this work, I know there's always another side. So my initial conversations after I sent off a letter of representation is usually what's going on, right? I want to know what CPS's version, and I could never get there with the caseworker because there wasn't anything. And we did have to involve her supervisor, and then they brought in an attorney. I don't always have that situation, but I could elaborate at length for what my experience was like with that caseworker and the frustrations that I had in my short time, but I want Mariah's experience to be the one we're left with. And so I just thought it was important to wrap up and say, we have time, we're happy to take questions. I don't know if that's what happens here, but we are happy to do that. Thank you for allowing us to share our experience.
Does anybody have any questions or anything you'd like to explore?
Well, the system really messed you up, and I'm sorry. I'm not necessarily, I'm shocked, but I'm not necessarily surprised, but I'm sorry this happened to you.
I appreciate that, and that's really why I'm here, is because I feel like if it could happen to me, it could happen to anyone. I'm not completely unique. There's somebody like everyone in the world, and if I'm going through this, somebody else is going through this right now too. So I'm happy to be here.
First, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing. I know that is not easy. And sitting before people you don't know and sharing your personal story and your personal life. And I know it took a lot of courage for you to be here. And I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to hear. My question, because I having worked in child welfare in Texas and Louisiana, I hear you, and I want you to know that I hear you. My question is for the attorney, and looking at the number of children in care that are disparate, disproportionate in terms of children of color. My question to you is, are you serving that population as well and providing that service? Because what I know, being a woman of color myself and working in state government in a leadership role, I have had my own experiences, not in child welfare, but understanding the difference of when you have legal representation and when you don't. And I know the difference in the impact. And so my question to you is, you know, as you so eloquently wrote off those numbers that were really powerful, and I wish you could say it again, because it was tremendously powerful. I think about the families, many of which who can't, regardless of race, ethnicity, right, who cannot afford to hire an attorney, especially those families that are disproportionately placed, children that are disproportionately placed in child welfare. Are you serving those children? Are you looking at those numbers?
Yes, and I'm sorry, I had to hand count some of my numbers before coming today, so I wasn't able to break down, but we do track all of that in our system. So in order to qualify for our services, you have to be financially ineligible, I guess is the way to say it. You have to be indigent. Beyond that, we cover such a diverse swath of Texas that absolutely, and I would say, I mean, I can eventually provide those because we do track race and ethnicity in our intakes. I wish we could provide representation to every single person. I do.
And I'm sorry, Judge, I just want to just kind of cap my comment by saying every family deserves that kind of service. Every family deserves, who is eligible, deserves it. So by no means am I saying that this young lady doesn't, and I'm grateful to hear what you all did for her. And 9.5 hours? Yeah, thank you.
And thank you. And I want to emphasize that we are very, very aware of disproportionality that happens at the investigation stage. I know a lot of those numbers track what happens in removals in court cases, but our eye is on disproportionality in investigations. Thank you.
Can I jump in on behalf of McLennan County, the project? As a representative of Casey Family Programs, I've been pretty involved in that project. And when we started the project approximately a year and a half ago, Ann worked with me at that, and we worked with Judge Coley in getting that project started. One of the big factors that we wanted to address was disproportionality in McLennan County, because their numbers were really looking pretty bad. And so we identified a couple of zip codes that we really wanted to concentrate on and bring in people of color and be sure that they were getting the services that they needed. One of the challenges of this kind of project that we're still kind of trying to figure out is how to get referrals for the project. Because you can't just ask CPS to turn over the names of everybody that's being investigated. That you can't do that. So what we ended up doing was we asked CPS every time they started an investigation and met the first time with the parent to hand them a brochure and a card for our project and encourage the folks to respond to it. And there's some inherent problems with that. Not that anybody's intentionally doing anything bad, but I think CPS investigators tend to sort of figure out which cases they think we could help with and maybe not the other ones. So there may be a little bit of cherry picking, but even more than that, we discovered that in those particular zip codes we were looking at, the families of color seemed to respond less when we could prove that they were getting the brochure. It was kind of an attitude of, it's more CPS, and even if CPS is offering me a lawyer, I don't want any more of that kind of service. So that's still a factor that we have to figure out, and we really are focusing on that in McLennan County, as Cindy is. But I just wanted to add that's a piece we've got to work on figuring out. Maybe our race equity committee here at the commission can help us do that. We've reached out, Methodist Homes there are going to help us set up some leadership in the communities of color and maybe get some more folks in and just spread the word better. But that's been some of our challenges in the programs. But Mariah, I can't express how eloquently I think she expressed the need and showed you all what the need for this kind of representation is. Thanks.
May I say something?
Sure.
Mariah, I'm Brock Boudreau, and I'm the Deputy Associate Commissioner for Texas Child Protective Services. And I thank you greatly for coming and bringing your story to us and escalating it to our level. Before coming into this position, I was the Director of Training for CPS. And I think that a lot of your story and your experience can help us to try and stop this at the top. If you'll be around today, I'd like to meet you at lunch and see if there's something we can do.
I'm so sorry, doctor. She's might have to get back to her kids, but we can exchange information.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anything else? Well, thank you very much. As has been expressed, this has certainly been very courageous of you to come. We all really appreciate your sharing your story. Frequently, we don't hear these stories because those aren't the cases that we as judges see or that we as appellate judges review. And I'm still curious exactly how you all got together. Maybe I just missed that story, but what happened?
Sure. So just to explain, we do intakes for our 68 counties. Trala has an intake line. Anyone can call in any of our service areas and apply. We take intakes every day of the week, weekdays. We also have community referrals, and that includes shelter programs. It includes the Texas Legal Services Family Helpline. We get most of our referrals from them. And so we take a variety of referrals, but in her specific circumstance, the shelter worker at the domestic violence shelter that she went to after meeting with the detective knew of us and just called me and got me on the phone. And then I had her briefly tell me the story. The shelter does intakes for us. And so that was already up, but then we talked for 10 minutes and I knew I was just gonna take the case.
So the shelter could tell that she needed
The shelter-
representation and she trusted them.
She did, and that's exactly what happened. And then the shelter worker called me directly.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, that's great, Judge Sage, what you have brought up, because see, that happened in a way that she wouldn't feel threatened by CPS saying here, and somebody just thinking, well, here we go again down that, whatever. So thank you for that. And again, thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Ms. Dyer, for all you've done to help so many people. We really appreciate it very, very much. So thank you. So now we're going to look at some data trends. One of the pillars of the commission is continuous quality improvement, which of course what this is all about. And so we have to look at data and we need to have data driven decision making. We frequently share anecdotes and allegories about changes in removal trends. And we now, of course, just heard that very, very poignant and a story, real life, to bring it to all of our attention more really physically in our eyes. So we have thought that it would be very important to have a critical inspection of the available data that really exists so that we can get an accurate picture of how these cases are entering and exiting the system. So we're going to have our next presentation to help look at this from the front end of the system. The data committee helped put together the scope of this presentation. We're very appreciative of that. We have Sierra Fisher, the Director of Research and Evaluation at DFPS. Sierra? Yes, thank you. And Jeff Cox, the Senior Data Analysis at our own OCA. Thank you. Judge Stuckey is a commissioner, as we all know, and judge of the Syntax Child Protection Court South. And so Judge Stuckey, it's all yours.
Well, good morning. That's a very hard presentation to follow. Obviously, the experience is always much more interesting thing to listen to a judge who unfortunately just hears things on the back end. But we do have some data today that we want to share with everybody. I'm going to claim no ownership over it. Sierra has done a great job with Jeff of putting this data together. So I'll let us kind of look into the data together. You know, over the course of, I guess, several months, we've all kind of talked about what is the data right now. We all kind of believe that cases have kind of gone down, but we want to kind of look at what's the real data and give everyone a real view of what's been going on over the last several months, plus last, we'll say, I think 2 years. So Sierra, we'll let you take off. See if I can help. So we know where we're pointing. Maybe we didn't put that or
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So so we kind of put our brains together to talk through some overall case changes that we've seen throughout the last couple of years. And so we're going to start by that top one, investigations and alternative response case numbers. So we've seen an increase in investigations and alternative response. So the red bars are those investigations that DFPS does. So thank you for tipping us off. And now we have a visual for what these are. So last year in fiscal year 2022, we saw about 230,000 investigations and then about 50,000 alternative response cases. Oh, great. Can you go back one? Thank you. So at the end of an investigation, there's a determination made by our staff. And so those case dispositions are outlined here. When we talk about a confirmed investigation, we're talking about a reason to believe disposition. So the red bar at the bottom there outlines we had 37,000 reasons to believe dispositions in fiscal year 2022, which was slightly lower than we saw in the previous fiscal years. Our most common disposition is ruled out, so about 100,000 in fiscal year 2022, which trends a little higher than previous fiscal years. And then we have those other two dispositions, unable to compute and unable to determine. So another kind of case trends that we wanted to outline is that at the end of an investigation, you're making that decision of whether there is a removal or not.
Okay, so this is my part. So what I'm going to be talking to you about on different parts of our presentation today is some of the data that came out of our Child Welfare Judges Conference. So a lot of the judges throughout the state who handle child welfare cases met in October of 2022, so just a few months ago. And several questions were asked of the group of judges. The Children's Commission was nice enough to put the doodle, I guess it's not a doodle poll, but put out the survey so that we can answer these questions. And one of the first questions that was asked of the group was, in the last year, what changes have you seen in the removals in your jurisdiction? And as you can see from the graphic of the judges that participated in the survey, which was probably, I would say we probably had 75 to 100 judges that participated in our conference. 80% believe that removals had decreased in their jurisdiction. About 11% believe that removals had increased, and approximately 9% believe that there had been no change. I was in the group that responded that removals had decreased. I had seen, in my opinion, a drastic decrease in the amount of cases that had come in. I would say, if you just asked for numbers, I would have said I'd probably have about a 50% drop. So we'll see if the actual data matches up with that.
Judge Stuckey, did you say that there were 75 judges who attended the conference, or 75 or 100 judges who responded to the survey? Or what's your sample size?
I'm not sure what the sample size is. Jamie, do you know what it was?
We had about 90 attend, and the questions were different. This one, we got almost 100% response rate on. So as we went later on in the presentation, we maybe closer to 75, 80 responses to the survey.
Okay.
Somewhere between 80 and 90, we could say.
Can we get a copy of the data, of the slides?
Yes, we will have it on our website, but we can also share it in a follow-up.
Thank you.
So this next slide highlights the data coming from CPCMS, the Child Protection Court Management System. This is a continuation of the data that.
Can you speak a little louder, please?
Yes. So this is a continuation of the data coming out of CPCMS that I initially pulled for my report that I wrote last year. This is data that we now have the ability to pull on a monthly basis. So we're seeing kind of a continuation. I presented previously up until May of 2022. So that May of 2022 to January of 2023 is some of the data that we haven't seen. So we kind of see this plateau of new filings that happens. And we can see that last month that it started declining from was March of 2021. But this is the more recent data that we're seeing out of CPCMS. So then this next slide, this is a portion of the report I put out last year, but more of a continuation of these courts because we'll see some of this data. But these 5 courts were selected for their basically data integrity and what they represent. So more rural areas, kind of moderately sized districts or courts. And so you'll see some of the data solely from these courts and broader as well. Next. So for those 5 courts, we see that same statewide trend in new filings that kind of just levels out around October of 2021.
Jeff, may I ask you before you go on, there was a pretty significant peak at March of 2021 in your slide, 2 slides before this. Do you or Judge Stuckey have any sort of commentary on what that looks like or what was going on then?
I can't speak to causation here, and I'm not sure if there wasn't a specific event that occurred there. I know that in my report previously, I looked at, obviously March of 2020, but also September of 2021 as well. But I'm not quite sure, just like you.
Okay, so I have a potential explanation for some of it. So, as a group, we all think about when the statutory changes went into effect. That one of the things is CPS internally was kind of preparing for this over a long period of time. So there wasn't really just a day where they said, okay, everything we taught you last month, forget, this is the new standard. So CPS was actually preparing over time. So as you see the decrease, I think it's really better to kind of look back at where we were when the legislature ended. Legislature ended, so we knew what was going to be going into law September 1st. So as the department kind of prepared itself, I think we kind of see this fall off down to where the statutes actually took effect. So I think it's, I can't really give you what happened completely between the peak and then this valley of when the statutes took place. But I will say that CPS was kind of internally, I think, changing the burden themselves and kind of moving down toward what the new statutes required.
I'll maybe add one theory in that we also have seasonal variation in removals for CPS. So maybe there's something there. Often we kind of have a drop in December and then it goes back up. And then if I think of March of 2021, that's when vaccines were coming out. So I wonder if maybe there was some COVID.
Right, that's what I was thinking.
Effect as well.
Mhm.
I mean, those are all theories, but. So you all are smart people. What you assumed in the survey was what played out for us for DFPS as well. So children removed from the home, that legislation and policy changes internally, we did see a drop in fiscal year 2022. So we had 9,600 kids removed in fiscal year 2022, which was about 40% less than our fiscal year 21.
So can I ask you, so as a matter of policy within the department, with the new statutory changes, did you all have training or discussion about, did the level of risk that you were looking at, did that change?
I'm not sure Sierra is the person to
Folks,
Yeah.
So I think I can answer that, 'cause I'm the director of policy. So we did have trainings, as Judge Leahy said, that prior to the bill, we didn't know the bill was coming out. So prior to that, we did have training in regards to the language of law and training in regards to the risk and what the statute would be.
It's just interesting because words are words, and we're always trying to figure out, Justice Huddle and I, what these words mean. And so, who knows? The legislature may think they are making it very clear and know what the words are, but when they get to us, it's not that easy. And you either, and the attorneys in the room certainly know that. And so how would you even, assess that at that stage of things?
I'm not sure.
In terms of how the risk
Okay, so.
changed because of the language in the statute.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know in regards to assessing. I think that we didn't change our behaviors in regards to how we investigate a case. I think it really was more about the standard of what a removal now is and how you have to meet that new burden for removal. And so that meant if it wasn't a removal, it didn't necessarily mean that we were closing that investigation or doing something like that. It might have meant that we now are referring that family to FBSS, or we might have been referring that family or seeking another type of legal intervention, whether it be a court service or something like that. So even though they weren't removed, it wasn't a situation that we feel that children were left at risk or anything like that.
So can you give me an example of a child, hypothetically, who would have been removed under the prior standard, who would not be removed under the current standard?
Example of a child that would be removed. I think one of the things we talked about is the non-emergency removal. I think really did have an effect in regards to what we did. And so in some of those cases where we might have put another type of safety intervention in place and filed for a non-emergency, we're either filing that as an exigent case, but sometimes we can't do that either. And so to give a specific example, I can think about a case in which perhaps a child was injured and we don't know who caused the injury. It could have been mom or could have been dad. And A lot of times those cases would have been filed as a non-emergency. And now we are probably sitting most of those cases through FBSS with a safety monitor in place for the family versus filing for a non-emergency. I think I'm impressed, for some example, that's the best one I can think of right now.
So thank you for jumping in on the spot.
Yeah, so just looking at the removals by the fiscal year across each month, I sort of mentioned that you sometimes see a drop in, November, December, back to school, we usually see an increase as well, and right before the summer. So the seasonality, I think our numbers looking into fiscal year 23 are trending pretty similar.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what we're seeing here is, again, more data from CPCMS. We see all the new filings, but also we're seeing this inverse effect, increase in final orders that has occurred as well. Again, this was data that was updated from, I just added this May to January information. So we're seeing kind of a broader growth, or increase in closures, whereas the filings again have remained have plateaued since about that September 2021 date.
So let me jump in for a minute. I just want to make sure everybody has some context. So these are case filings and closures in all the CPC, so in the child protection courts. So if I remember the number correctly, there's 31, I think, child protection courts who we have our own internal data management program, which is the CPCMS that Jeff is talking about. So what you're looking at is basically the case filings and closures of our 31 courts who handle CPS full time. So this is not giving you a picture of what's happening in district courts throughout the state. I think those numbers we would like to say are probably would parallel ours, but you're looking at the data just for our 31 courts. So one, I want to kind of give you the context, but you'd also not think that there's only 3,000 cases closed statewide. These are just our child protection courts.
Yes, thank you, Judge Secretary. And so this is the number of hearings from CPCMS, so all the CPC courts. And so we see just a general decline since March of 2021, with a slight increase here in the last month, from December to January. And again, this is that kind of narrow focus of 5 selected child protection courts, and we see a very similar trend throughout this graph as well. However, just a little bit more of a variation due to the smaller population size.
Jeff, Dylan had a question for you.
Yes.
I got a quick question of clarification. I think, to be clear, for this slide and the last slide, does that include all cases in CPCMS, like both court ordered services cases and conservatorship cases?
Yes.
So for both the last two, those include all different types of filings. Thank you, just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, so the next question that we as a group of judges was asked is, in the last year, what changes have you seen in ex-jip removals? So these are the removals prior to a court order in our jurisdiction. And so typically, as judges, we don't see very many of these. So the data is that about 18% of judges responding believe that ex-jip removals had increased. 50% believe that ex-jip removals had decreased, and then we're about 32% that believe there had been no change. I actually think I was in our middle group, in the red group, that thought ex-jip removals had decreased. This was something that when the statutes changed, I wasn't really personally sure what was going to happen. Like when we see, when you take away non-emergency removals, and you basically have an option of either an emergency removal or court services. I wasn't really sure which way some of these things were going to skew, whether we would have some more significant cases that would result in ex-jip removals, or whether we would see a drop. And I can tell you as a judge, when you're counting on CPS and the job they're doing, they could wait longer. Like they could investigate longer, they could wait for, I'll say, a bigger incident, like kind of a bigger trigger point. So it might be so bad at some point that they feel like they need to immediately remove that child. Or there could be an intervention beforehand where they use more reasonable efforts, work longer with the family to prevent a removal. So this was kind of one of those things that I'm not sure personally, I knew which way this was going to go. But I believe that removals had decreased in my jurisdiction, but I didn't personally feel like they dropped significantly. There had been a drop. Okay, so the next one was another question asked the judges, and it was, what change have you seen in the severity where removal was requested? Overwhelmingly, the judges that responded believed that the removal cases were now more severe, and I think it's very telling about why we got to that point. I think it's because the department is actually working longer with families. And so I'll give you an example. There might be one extra domestic violence event. Well, in practice, that looks worse when you're looking at an affidavit, or continued drug use that escalated over time. So I'm not faulting the department for why our cases looks more severe, because I don't think you can fault the department for working harder in some of our cases. But I will say, as a judge, it is sometimes scary to think when you look at an affidavit that's now 2 pages longer, that you might be able in hindsight to now look at a case and say, well, they may actually have brought this to court last month, or maybe they could have brought it the month before. But these are things that I think we get the benefit of in hindsight, but on paper, they do look more severe. So in this case, there were about 29% of judges that thought that there had been no change in the severity, and 5% that believe they were in fact now less severe.
So another piece of this legislation had to do with neglect. And so at the end of during an investigation, there's different allegations added. Allegations are per child, and we talked about those dispositions. So we have dispositions for each allegation for each child on an investigation. So on the left graph here, you'll see if we add up all those allegations that were confirmed, so they have a reason to believe disposition, we saw more confirmed allegations in the previous fiscal years compared to fiscal year 2022. So that graph has, fewer of those confirmed allegations when added up all together. And then the right, I know this is a really busy graphic, but it really is to show you the counts of these confirmed allegations in these different categories. And so I'll point you to the neglectful supervision line. It's the one that makes up the biggest share of our confirmed allegations. And you'll see our neglectful supervision number did drop in fiscal year 2022. So it's about 20%. And so, but that's not the only allegation category. Every single allegation category, we saw a drop in confirmed allegations, except abandonment, which is a pretty small population there. And then if you want to move to the next slide, I have kind of a visual graphic. If we just take out those 5 top confirmed allegations, you can visually see here neglectful supervision dropped by quite a bit. The other ones, yeah, there's a drop, but they're not as common, and they're much, kind of a smaller drop in comparison to the total for those groups. So not all confirmed disposition doesn't necessarily, a disposition of reason to believe doesn't necessarily mean that we'll have a removal. So you can kind of think of these as related, but not necessarily the same. So we have a removal reason. And when we look at removal reasons, the reason for removal, again, a child can have multiple reasons for removal, but neglectful supervision is our most common reason for removal. As a percentage, it went down slightly, so 2%. In fiscal year 2022. And then you'll see across our other most common removal reasons here, there's a slight increase for physical abuse for kids that were removed and physical neglect. And then, sexual abuse looks pretty similar and just small variations in our wrapper, we call it refusal to accept parental responsibility and medical neglect. So if you just pull out those neglectful supervision numerically, you can see the counts here are much smaller for fiscal year 2022.
So this is, again, data from CPCMS, so looking at that, basically on the other end from the court side, case open reason. And this covers the 3 neglect categories within CPCMS: medical neglect, neglectful supervision, and physical neglect. And this is, it's a stacked bar chart, so this is representative of the entire neglect category, number of cases that were opened during this time frame. So this is that same information, but this is the representative population of each of those categories. So we can see that the types of neglect are changing as they change. So we see less of physical neglect and kind of an increase, a slight increase of the medical neglect, whereas neglectful supervision just keeps the large proportion of all these cases that are open.
So I also think it's important to always look at what policies and what their implications are for, disparities and disproportionality in our system. So in fiscal year 2022, we did see a slight increase for African-American in our removal population. But overall, there's not large shifts across these different racial groups. There were some slight differences in how the removal change affected different racial groups. So I think that's important to note. But as a whole, if we're just looking at the removal population, just small changes in the percentages.
All right, and the next topic is good. Judge Stuckey.
Okay, so one of the next questions that was asked at the Child Welfare Judges Conference was, in the last year, how have the filings of court-ordered services or motions to participate cases changed in your jurisdiction? And as you can see from the graphic, it is fairly split, almost evenly between filings have increased and that there was no change. A few judges, 26%, believed that court-ordered services had actually decreased in our jurisdictions. One of the things I'll tell you about this number is, if you ask me every 2 to 3 months, I'd probably jump in a different category. I feel like we kind of go through ebbs and flows of filings, probably more so in court-ordered services than probably anything else. I mean, removals, we're just gonna say are randomized. I mean, they happen when they happen, but I would say that I get court-ordered services cases in clumps. I don't get any for a couple of weeks, and then I get 4 in a week. So I don't, maybe people meet with their higher up staff and they cull through their cases and decide, case direction, but I tend to get them in clumps. So I'm not sure how I respond to this. I either said no change or filings increase. Okay, so one of the next questions was, have you seen a change in the severity of the cases where court-ordered services and NPTs is requested? Overwhelmingly, judges thought there had been a change. So actually, that's not true. So 47% thought there was no change, 51% thought the cases had been more severe, 2% thought they were less severe. Overwhelmingly, I see a lot of court-ordered services cases, I think, in the old scheme before the statutory changes would have been removals of one type or another, emergencies or non-emergencies. Overwhelmingly, probably in the category of non-emergency removals. So we're working with a lot more families in the courthouse, which I don't think is a bad thing. So we got oversight over CPS, but we are allowing those children to remain either at home or in a safety plan without doing illegal removal of children.
This is the data coming from CPCMS, and as Judge Stuckey said, you're seeing this kind of like in clumps. So we see like every other month that these are happening. This span of time, we're not seeing many of these court-ordered services at all in those 5 selected courts.
So most of the family-based safety services are not court-ordered; they're voluntary, and so these numbers are a lot higher than, you know, what was shown in the last graphic, but in fiscal year 2022, we had about 10,000 stages opened, so cases, and that was less than fiscal year 21, but that we had a decline in those 2 fiscal years due to policy changes compared to previous years. And I would say our numbers for this fiscal year, we're trending about 1,000 a month. So I think we'll be somewhere between, I mean, it's only a part of the way through the year, but we're trending about part of the way between fiscal year 21 and 2022.
Okay, so as a judge, this is the most surprising slide to me in the whole entire slide deck. Let me tell you why. First, if we're not removing a higher level of children, if there's not as many court order services, we would expect more family-based safety service cases. But I'll tell you, just kind of put in context of the RTVs, I kind of pulled the data that's back on slide. I think it's 4. So in fiscal year 18, you'll see that there were about 18, almost 19,000 family-based cases. There were 41,000 RTVs in fiscal year 18. In fiscal year 19, there were also 42,000 RTVs approximately. Fiscal year 20, we had about 43,000 RTVs. And then in fiscal year 2021, there were 43,000 RTVs, but now we've dropped to about 14,000 family-based cases. And then last year, so fiscal year 22, there were 37,000 RTVs, but less than 10,000 family-based cases. This is a number that I would have expected to drastically increase. If you're not working with family in the courthouse, I think these are just being referred out to community-based services. I mean, we're still saying that there's a rate of 37,000 cases of sustained child abuse or neglect, but there's less people that are being worked with. So I think, you know, this is a question for all of us to think about is, you know, one, are children in Texas safe, and what role does Child Protective Services in the courthouse, you know, the courts? Where should we be in the process? Because it's really about, as we hear from, you know, some of our people with lived experience, I, for one, think judicial oversight over some of this stuff would be really important, because we can make sure that some of these bad things are not potentially happening out there. But the department seems to be trending down with the amount of people that they are working with. So either they're being referred out to community-based services, or they're just being closed out.
Justice Letterman, if I may, and Judge Sexton, you're spot on. And of course, this issue came up at our last commission meeting. And there was a policy change. Jerome, please jump in. There was a policy change regarding case referrals and length of service in FBSS that was made in the fall of 2020. Anytime you have a new policy, you want to look retrospectively to see what was the impact. And several of you, just including you, of course, brought up that you were concerned that you were not seeing cases going to FBSS and what had happened. Jerome and the rest of the investigations team worked with the child welfare team and have made modifications to that policy effective just October of 2022. So there's been training, there's been communication. So even at 1,000 rate, that would be an increase. It's not enough time to see, but I do expect you will see the FBSS cases go up. The original problem was so many cases went to FBSS that there was no way to really know what was going on. I mean, that wasn't very effective. But that pendulum went too far. And so as of October, we're bringing that pendulum back because there were clearly safety issues. And so that did change, and we're very appreciative of the courts. Further, our understanding grew even more based on the courts and judges' input in terms of what you were seeing. So I think you'll continue to see a change. Our challenge is to explain to the legislature that the funding at that level will not be sufficient, because we know the policy change is going to influence practice, and so we expect an increase there.
And I just want to add one more thing, and Judge Stuckey also hit on the thing that's happening in investigations because of this in regards to us modifying that policy is that we're keeping those investigations open just a little bit longer to ensure that the families got into those services and also doing a little bit more monitoring to ensure that the families are active in those services and participating in those services if they weren't going to FBSS. So because of that, we were holding those investigations up open longer than we had previously done before, because we wanted to make sure that the families were engaged in the service, we were referring them through the community, and also monitoring and checking to make sure that those children were safe.
Just one other observation, Sierra, we looked at the high in 2018 of removals and then the low in 2022. That's over a 50% drop. And I think what you showed, and Casey, we were interested in Casey as well, so we ran the numbers to see in terms of race and ethnicity what happened. So the bad news is we still have disproportionality. If this could be seen as good news, the good news is if there's a benefit to having less intrusion in family life and having, over 50% reduction in removals, that benefit applied to all racial and ethnic groups. And so I think that that's a bit encouraging in that, we weren't disparate in how that reduction occurred. Doesn't address, as Sheila so aptly brought up, and Cindy, you addressed in your practice that we still have disproportionality, but the reduction was very, went across the board without real change. I'm sorry, thank you, Judge.
You're welcome. And honestly, it's to hear from y'all what you're doing internally. It kind of helps tell us, a little bit about where the trends may be moving over the next few months and what we can expect. So thank you.
Yes.
I think something that needs to be mentioned too is when Tom was talking earlier about the department having emergency removals, but then when we did not have the ability to have non-emergency removals, what happened was the department felt like we have a case that needs to come into care, but we're going to let the judge decide instead of the department deciding. The legislature took that power away from us. And so there's a huge gap in judicial options. We had a very powerful tool that was removed from us on the judiciary side. When we go to FBSS, courts have a lot of carrots, but not many sticks. When we were in non-emergency type situations, very often, at least in my experience, we would take children into care and then immediately have a return or monitored return, which would practically be a robust family-based safety service case. So I'm glad that the agency is responding and very aggressively. But I think it bears mention that the judiciary has significantly less tools to assist under the current code than we did previously. And that, I think, is a significant reason why you see the trends that you see as well.
Yes.
I just had a question. Have you all had a chance, or is it too early to look at reoccurrence of maltreatment data? Are the kids safe is my question. On one hand, I'm thrilled that we're removing less kids. On the other hand, I'm concerned, are they safe, staying safe?
Yeah, I have it. So if we look at investigations that were closed with no services, the 12-month recidivism, how often do they come back within 12 months and have a new confirmed investigation? In fiscal year 2022, it was 5.7% compared to fiscal year 21, which was 7.5%. So we did actually decrease our recidivism. We did have some change in practices in confirmation, right? There's fewer confirmations as well, so it makes it a little messy, but we did see it decrease.
Okay, thank you.
Interesting.
I had a question on the closed cases. How many of those young people their cases were closed because they aged out?
The CBC, the Child protection courts.
Yeah, just kids in, I'm just curious about the data, what the data is telling us about kids in foster care and how many age out and whether that has changed or stayed relatively the same. I was just curious about that, if anybody knows about that, because it's one of the data.
Back to the data, so we did have part of the change in our removal practices, we have fewer kids removed that were older.
Okay.
So I would have to imagine that would affect some of the numbers of like cases closed, but aging out is a little different, I guess. I'd have to go back and get you the numbers, but
Yeah, I would just love to know what the data is telling us about that. Not for new referrals, but for kids who are already in foster care.
Sure. Okay.
I have a question. I would like to know, and thank you so much, Anne, for putting that context around equity. I checked off one of my questions. But I'd like to know, in terms of the children who are served in FDSS, do you have that data by race ethnicity? My concern would be, are children of color, are families getting those services? Are they just being closed out? What's happening? And are they a part of that recidivism if they're not getting that kind of support?
Yeah, we looked at it initially so we have policy changes with concurrent stages to make sure there wasn't, big trends that we didn't want. And initially there were big trends, but I haven't looked at it in a little bit, so but we can look at that.
Sarah, can I just ask, what's how do y'all define recidivism for?
So for that one is new confirmed investigation within 12 months. It's on our public website as well, just we have like monthly trends, so you can look at it there.
Anything else? Well, thank you very much for all of your work. We really appreciate it. I know that was very tedious and we really appreciate your going through that. It's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, I have the enviable pleasure of standing between you and lunch, so I will try to make it short, but there are a couple things that the staff wanted to highlight for you today. And everything that we work on is captured in writing behind the commission report, which is in tab 3 of your notebooks. And we put a lot of work into giving you all updates about all of our projects. So we will not be speaking to each of them today. We're only going to highlight a couple of things that have happened recently or that are on the horizon. So the first thing I wanted to mention was our 2022 annual report, which we submitted to the Supreme Court at the end of the year. And we did provide some copies for you all if anybody wants to take it home, but our themes here is strength through transitions and kind of thinking about everything everybody's been through the past few years and how we have an obligation to continue to serve the children and families of our state, even through these transitions, to exhibit our strength and our collaboration and our partnerships with one another. And we hope you enjoy it. And I want to give full credit to Jessica Ardijo on our team, who's the sole creative mind of the Children's Commission. And it's a big job to hold down with a whole bunch of lawyers and project managers who are very task oriented. So if you see her, make sure to give her compliments on it. The next thing we want to talk about is our incarcerated parents poster and the proof we have over there on display. I really invite you all to go take a look at it, but I'm going to kick it over to Dylan to talk about it in a little bit more detail.
Thank you, Jamie, and I'll start out by again thanking Jessica Ardijo, because she is our design guru and she did a wonderful job on this report. I think it looks beautiful. This is part of our ongoing series of projects that are designed to help parents and children better understand the attorney-client relationship. We have done pamphlets for parents, we have done coloring books for children, we did a youth voice video, a pamphlet for fathers, and so this is the next in that series of projects. It's really designed to try to make sure that incarcerated parents understand that they can still be involved in this CPS case and they can still be involved in their child's life as early as possible in the case, so they can get their services going and it doesn't delay the permanency for the children to not have an incarcerated parent involved. We work with this language on our work group that consists of board certified parents representatives. We also worked with the Department of Criminal Justice to make sure that they were comfortable with the language. And we're really pleased with the results. We've worked with TCJ about getting it in their facilities. They offered to put it in our newsletter to get that out to all the facilities in addition to being posters that will hang up at various places. We've also had a really good response from sheriff organizations. I really want to thank Justice Byrne for getting in contact with some local sheriffs. The response we've seen from them has been really, really positive. And so we're hoping to present this at the upcoming Sheriff Association of Texas Conference this summer, as well as the Texas Jail Association Conference, to make sure that those local facilities are aware of this and they can access it to try to get those people who are incarcerated at a local level as well. So if anybody has any questions about how to get this to their local facility, please feel free to reach out to me, because we'd love to do anything we can to support that. That's all I have.
Thanks, Don. Well, we're very excited that the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, NCJFCJ, is coming to Texas. And we're lucky to have a board member here. Judge Hoffman, do you want to share a little bit about the conference?
Yeah, we are very excited to be able to have this conference in Dallas in a few weeks. It's going to be starting on Sunday, March 19th for a couple of days. Many of you are registered. Thank you very much to the commission for providing some robust scholarships for folks to go. I'm very excited. We have some local presenters that are going to be presenting. I know Judge Villalon is going to do that. Justice Lehrman is going to be there. Maybe Justice Huddle, Senator West will be present, maybe even the chief. So it's going to be kind of a star-studded event off and on. But mainly I just wanted to mention that, we have an awesome, wonderful organization to help us as Texas judges with child welfare cases that we're sitting on. They do a great job, obviously. There's not necessarily an organization of juvenile judges in Texas. And so that's something we may be kicking around at that conference. And NCJFCJ is going to have a state meeting for us, a luncheon on Tuesday. And so if you're not able to attend the conference, but you may want to participate in that meeting with regards to juvenile judges and organizing them in Texas, you're certainly welcome to come to the luncheon that day as well. There's a reduced price for attendance. So I encourage everyone to come, even if you're not a judge, you're welcome to attend the conference. And if you're from Texas, you're going to be able to be at the table for lunch. So I hope to see you there.
Thanks, Judge Hoffman. Well, the last big update we wanted to share with you all is that we had a grant last year with Texas CASA to develop a couple of things. So you all should have this written handout, which is about understanding the roles of all the professionals in the CPS case. And it's a really good, very high level overview. The target audience is for parents and families to really understand who the different players are, because it can be quite overwhelming to really figure out who's who, what's everybody's role. And we wanted to provide a really easy to access, easy to understand resource and accompanying videos. And we have our two talent, which is what we call them, in the room with us today. So Judge Hoffman did the videos in English and Judge Morales did the videos in Spanish. And before we show the videos, we'll show you just a sample, but I would invite Vicki to share any remarks about the process to develop these or what you hope it will be. Sure. Anything at all.
Yeah, thank you. First, thank you all for funding the grant. It's important for the people who are involved in the child welfare, I'm going to use the term loosely, the consumers of the service, to be able to understand who the players are, what their role is, in language that speaks to them instead of speaks in the jargon of the professions. And so that's what this project was designed to do. And we're excited to have birthed this child, and we're excited to see you all, to have you all here today. So thank you.
Okay, so Andrea, whenever you're ready. I'll stall a little bit and say that Patrick put together a great financial report. Not a lot to report on it today. We're just pretty early in the fiscal year, but that is in your notebook as well. If you have any questions, ask him, don't ask me. This is the part where we rely on technology and hope everything goes according to plan.
And Jamie, I just wanted to acknowledge that there are a lot of people in the room that helped review these and contributed to what the content should be. And so I just want to express appreciation, and we'll be sending this out in our newsletters and to all the folks who participated over email next week. So, but we wanted this to be the official debut of this new resource.
A judge is in charge of the court and usually sits behind the bench at the front of the courtroom. Sometimes the judge wears a black robe. Judges make the best decisions they can about how families can keep kids safe based on the information that's available to them. The judge listens to everyone and considers all evidence presented to them in court before deciding what will happen in a case. This is why it is important that everyone attend each court hearing and speak up about what they want to happen. The judge decides if a child should stay with their parents or stay somewhere else. The judge also asks if the child is getting the education, medical care, and other things they need while they are not able to live with their parents. The judge's job includes making sure everyone in court is treated with respect. The judge should make sure that most parents and all kids in every case get an attorney as soon as possible. They also ensure that the attorneys and caseworkers involved in the case are doing their jobs. If you have a concern about the judge serving in your case, you can tell your attorney or tell the judge. If that doesn't work, you can file a complaint with the State Commission on Judicial Conduct.
So there are videos for each of these roles: guardian ad litem, attorney ad litem, parent's attorney, and the attorney for the state. And we'll show you a brief preview of the one in Spanish. It's the same. We worked really hard on the translation. But Judge Morales did an absolutely beautiful job translating it to Spanish for us.
El juez está a cargo del tribunal y por lo general se sienta detrás del estrado frente de la corte. A veces el juez se viste con una toga negra. Los jueces toman las mejores decisiones posibles sobre cómo las familias pueden proteger a los niños basándose en la formación que tienen disponible. El juez escucha a todos y considera toda la evidencia que se le presentan en el tribunal antes de decir lo que pasará en un caso. Por eso es importante que todos asistan a cada audiencia del tribunal y hablen sobre lo que desean que ocurra. El juez decide si un niño debe quedarse con sus padres o quedarse en otro lugar. El juez también pregunta si el niño está recibiendo educación, atención médica y otras cosas que necesita mientras no puede vivir con sus padres. El trabajo del juez incluye asegurarse de que todos en el tribunal sean tratados con respeto. El juez debe asegurarse de que la mayoría de los padres y todos los niños en el caso cuenten con un abogado tan pronto como sea posible. También se asegura de que los abogados y trabajadores sociales involucrados en el caso hagan su trabajo. Si tienen inquietudes sobre el juez que está atendiendo su caso, puede hablarlo con un abogado o con el juez. Si eso no ayuda, puede presentar una queja ante la Comisión de Conducta Judicial del Estado.
That was great. So any nominations for an Academy Award? That was great. Thank you all.
I would like to acknowledge Sarah Crockett, who's our Director of Public Policy
Oh, wow.
at Texas CASA, who really brought this over the finish line, and she was speaking to you earlier, but I just want to make sure she's acknowledged.
Thank you so much. Very good.
That concludes our staff updates.
Okay, so we're ready for lunch? Good, and we'll be back at 12:30. Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed the lunch. We're ready to get started. So for our next segment, I am pleased to open the DFPS update. Dr. Boudreau is standing in for Ms. Bañuelos today. Dr. Boudreau, we've already heard from him earlier, is the Deputy Associate Commissioner for CPS. Ms. Abraham, so Sarah Abrahams, welcome, is here to report on behalf of Ms. Rasco. And Mr. Green, Jerome Green, is the Director of Policy and Practice for Investigations Alternative Response at CPI. We're grateful to each of you for being here today. We appreciate your participation throughout the meeting. And now I'd like to give you the floor to give us the DFPS update.
Thank you, Justice Sarah. Is it okay if Sarah goes first?
The floor is yours to manage as you wish. I just remind you to speak up. We have a better mic system up here than you do, so the folks on the other end of the room would appreciate your speaking up.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having us. I generally am not told that folks have problems with my volume, but if y'all can't hear me over there, just give me a wave. I'm just going to share a little bit about 4 different prevention and early intervention programs and one faith-based and community engagement program that directly impact the courts and that I think will be of interest to you guys, and I'm happy to answer any questions because I'm gonna tackle them fairly high level. The first one is really connected to a partnership between DFPS and the Commission and the Office of Court Administration for the implementation of early intervention court liaisons. These liaisons are, we're essentially creating through investment from PEI, 3 early court liaisons in Bell, Galveston, and Lubbock counties. The intention behind this program is really to increase the connectivity between child protection courts and local resources. In some ways, it's specifically focused on building capacity around Family First and FFPSA resources, but really it's about bringing a judicial and legal voice to local community collaboration so that local community partners can really better understand what are the needs of families that are coming before the court, and also helping courts and court staff and judges in particular understand the resources that may be available in the communities. The role of the liaisons are also to conduct readiness and local needs assessment to determine feasibility for implementation of specialty courts like infant and toddler or family drug treatment courts, and really to assist the courts in identifying opportunities for parent navigation, kinship navigation, and other care leadership and support programs. There are currently liaisons in the 3 counties that I mentioned, Bell, Galveston, and Lubbock. All 3 of these liaisons are regularly attending court, both in person and virtually. They don't work directly with families, so they are not meant to be caseworkers or case managers or provide any direct advice to families. They are really there to support both families, court attorneys in identifying available community resources to meet the needs of families that are navigating the judicial system and supporting the broader community through community level systems change. I believe there is a judge in one other county who's pursuing county funding or private funding for a similar position, and we've been working with the Children's Commission to fund a formal evaluation conducted by Texas A&M. That is just beginning now, but we're expecting some initial results from the evaluation by the summer. So this is a project we're really excited about, and it already gotten really positive feedback from both the courts and the communities. And I just want to share, in Galveston County in particular, which was our first to launch, I believe, the early court liaison there was able to spearhead an effort to connect a local provider with the jail to provide parenting classes and counseling to incarcerated mothers and fathers. And they regularly attend family team meetings with families as a way of providing support to professionals in those team meetings around potential community resources. So that's an exciting project that that we're looking forward to sharing additional data. In addition to that program and some of our broader prevention programming, kinship caregiving and kinship family support has been a big priority for PEI and for DFPS overall. And we have been working through an FFPSA, a Families First Prevention Services Act Kinship Navigator pilot program. So many of you guys are probably familiar with some of the prevention services that are connected to FFPSA, but this federal legislation set aside some additional money and support specifically for kinship families and kinship navigation programs in particular. In FY21, 4 PEI, so prevention and early intervention phase grantees. So these are existing grantees that were serving families across the state using family counseling and coaching and family support work, began developing implementation plans for kinship navigator programs. These are primarily meant to support informal kinship care. So upstream of our sort of more formal kinship placements that might occur outside of child welfare. Those support grantees are ACH, Child and Family Services, Catholic Charities, Lovett, DePelchin Children's Center, serving Fort Bend, Harris, and Waller, and New Horizons, serving Callahan, Coleman, Jones, Taylor, Brown, Culpa, Bills, and San Saba. That program, each of those are really very community-driven kinship navigator programs, but they share a few things in common, including providing resource and referral, community-based partnership, and providing some basic needs assistance to those families. Just in this past year, those kinship navigator programs had more than 16,000 interactions with kinship families and community members just in those 4 communities alone. We are also conducting a formal evaluation of that program with the goal of being able to submit that program to the federal clearinghouse and eventually being able to draw down the funds to match our general revenue dollars as a way of continuing to expand. Okay, 2 more that I'm going to talk about. I think when Sasha was here last time, she spoke a little bit about our expansion of home visiting, evidence-based home visiting programs to support 2 very specific populations. One, pregnant and parenting youth in foster care, and the other really to expand our evidence-based home visiting capacity to serve families and family-based safety services. I just want to give a little bit of an update about where we are with those 2 initiatives. The first is that through that Family First Transition Act funding, we were able to fund 8 nurse family partnership sites across the state to really dive in and prioritize services to pregnant and parenting foster youth. We relied on the data that we with DFPS to identify which counties had the highest population of pregnant and foster youth, and added the capacity to serve about 135 additional families through that expanded initiative. We also, just in this past September, redistributed some additional dollars to fund our HOPES grantees. So those are grantees across the state that are specifically focused on providing evidence-based parenting support and family support to families with children 0 to 5. We asked a handful of those, 12 of those sites, to add some additional funding to increase capacity to serve families specifically in family-based safety services. In part, this is about an integration in preparation for serving those families through FFPSA approved parenting education and health programming. That allowed us to increase the capacity for that to 165 additional families across those 12 counties. And I think I have one more quick update, which is that, and this is coming from our faith-based and community engagement division. The Department of Family and Protective Services has been working to develop a clergy in the court program. It's an initiative designed to increase the awareness of clergy and faith communities to the needs of families in court, and also help to help the clergy and faith community provide community resources that may be able to help families regardless of their CPS stage of service. DFPS is partnering with judges statewide to invite clergy and faith community members to attend court proceedings, both for their education and to introduce the faith community to families in their churches and community and provide additional opportunities to support those families. So our director of faith-based and community engagement asked me to both present an initial description of these programs. It's really allowing a way for the faith community to take action when they're aware of community needs. Several faith leaders have created recovery-oriented programs or parenting classes as a part of their faith community, and parents and families have often attended this as a part of their CPS plan requirement. But creating a more formal liaison program and relationship between the courts and these leaders in the faith community, we believe will continue to assist families beyond their time in the child welfare system and help these faith community leaders who want to step up and provide the correct kind of support and mentorship with more information about what families need and what judges would like to see in terms of community resources. So this is the interactive part of my presentation, which is the question from our director of faith-based and community engagement was that wondering if any commission judges were already familiar with this clergy in the court program, if that is something that has come up on your radar before. I see a couple of nods. Are there any judges that are actively participating in this program now? So yeah, so 1, 2, fantastic.
So we were, I'm sorry, I just need to say we were, but the problem is that we have these programs that appear in our courts and then they go away. And so we had a wonderful liaison in our court for about 1.5 years, and then she left the department and the program just went away. But it worked. While it was there, it was very helpful. And it really connected our families with the resources in the communities.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
I had the same experience in Webb County. We had a liaison that was excellent. She was bringing in the clergy to the courtrooms and the adversary hearings, and we were matching them up with families. But then she also left the department and we never got a replacement, so we weren't able to continue that program. Of course, this was pre-COVID.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. I think my last comment is just to say that if there are judges that are interested in learning more about this model, either at a future meeting or through individual outreach by our faith-based and community engagement staff, that I'm happy to set up that conversation or to work with the commission staff to provide any additional information. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jerome.
So I'm here to update the commission on the efforts with our Texas Family First pilot, which we've been about 120 days now. The pilot's been in place. Just to give you an update of what the pilot is, House Bill 3041 directed the department to develop a pilot to divert families who are at imminent risk of removal into an evidence-based service model. And so we have contracted with 4 SCCs to provide these services to families that are at imminent risk of removal. And so the pilot right now is in 4 regions. It's Region 1, which is the Amarillo, Lubbock, and surrounding areas. Region 2, Wichita Falls and surrounding areas. Region 3, Tarrant, and 6 other counties in Tarrant County, and Region 8B, which is the rural parts of San Antonio. And this pilot allows for investigation, so that the cases can come strictly from investigations, and come from FBSS, it cannot come from conservatorship. But what we've been doing is when we have identified a danger to children, and we've been able to come up with a safety plan that allows the children to stay in the home. That's also in the law, that the children have to stay with the parent in their home. But in investigation, we have been able to identify a appropriate family member or friend who can monitor and provide supervision for that parent, so that we can avoid removing and placing that child in foster care. We are sending them to the Texas Family First pilot. And when they go to Texas Family First, those families receive evidence-based services through our providers. And what does evidence-based services mean? This is a research-based.
Means
program.
what? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I couldn't hear you.
Oh, sorry. So the evidence-based is a research-based program where providers will work with family individually in their home. And so, depending on the modality, families will have a provider in their home up to 4 hours a week to work on whatever issue, whatever safety issue we've determined in the investigation. Anything that is outside of the scope of that provider would still be handled by a Texas Family First case manager who works for the department. So let's say, for example, if the family needed drug treatment or something else, that would be something where our Texas Family First case manager would be handling that. But the evidence-based portion of it is the contract to our SMCC. One of the great things about the program that we found so far is that in the areas of the population where we're having children who are coming into foster care for mental health needs, we are finding that the families that we've been able to divert for this program has avoided us taking those children into care. And so we're really excited about that population of our cases that are not, those children are not coming into care. I know we've got some questions from some of the judges who are in those pilot areas. One of the things that's also important to note that I did mention is that the law requires court oversight. And so the family cannot go into the pilot unless they are court ordered into the pilot. And so we have got some questions from judges in regards to just what their leeway in regards to referring families into the pilot. And we are still continuing to work with the judges to find ways we can get more families into the pilot. I think one of the things that we are coming up across is that we do have capacity in our regions. Right now, Region 1, for example, we have the capacity to offer this pilot to 40 families. And right now, we only have 5 families in the pilot. And so we are working with our providers, we're working with our staff to come up with more ways to get families into this pilot. One of the things that we have done is we have increased the counties in hopes of getting more families into the pilot. And we're only 120 days in, and so we're also doing more training with our staff, doing more training with our legal to ensure that we are utilizing this really beneficial pilot. And so the pilot right now is scheduled to end in September. I don't believe so. I think it's going to probably be extended. And so we'll be able to get more information and hopefully offer this across the entire state. But we're really excited about it. It is in the families that have been referred, it has been very successful. We had a case just recently in which a mom who has had prior terminations went into the pilot with a new baby that she's had, and she's doing very well in regards to making some positive changes. And so we look forward to increasing our numbers and getting more families into the pilot.
Great, Judge.
In light of what the judge said, you're saying that it's slated to end in September. So then, I'm sorry?
The pilot is, right.
The pilot. So then will the program continue beyond that or no?
No, so unless there's an appropriation made to extend it, which we feel that it will be. We do feel that there is support in the legislature to extend this pilot past September. And so to answer your question, we feel it will be.
do you plan to extend it beyond those counties that you're currently serving? Because it sounds like primarily they are North Texas. I'm just curious, well, with the exception of San Antonio. Do you plan to extend it to other areas? And then my last question is, how did you determine which areas you were gonna do the pilot in?
So to answer that question, the language in the law instructed the FPS to pilot this in two regions. We actually went ahead and did it in 4. And the determination was based off just the language of the bill also. We were supposed to do it in a large county, a large urban area, and then a rural area. So Tarrant became our large area, and then those other surrounding ones became our smaller areas. We, at this time, we're not looking to expand it unless we are legislatively mandated to. But we do recognize that it would work in a lot of other counties, but I will also add though, in Region 8B or Region 8, for example, we have expanded out to some other counties that are outside of the original populated areas, just so we can get more families.
Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to give you a shout out. I know Judge Stuckey and I both have Region 8 counties and both have cases in the program. And I'll say that the 2 parents that came to court for their first hearing were the 2 happiest parents I've ever seen in court for their first hearing, because they were really surrounded by services. It's a very rural area. And so I hope it continues. It's successful as far as I can tell, and Judge Stuckey may want to speak to it.
So I had my first hearing, which was the first initial hearing yesterday, and I think the family appreciated. There are going to be so many people there to help support them through the process. So just as a judge on the bench, I'd like to see, obviously, more families given this opportunity to take part in the pilot project.
And like I said, we are working on that at expanding counties, and also, one of the things that we've done recently also is look at in all those counties in regards to the pilot, those cases in which there are staffing them for removal, we're also trying to intervene and see if that would be something that would be routing that case into Southern First versus a traditional removal. I think the issue becomes is that some of those cases are very serious. As you know, our families are dynamic, and so come up with a plan for safety. Unfortunately, sometimes those plans fall through, and so that we just have to take another route, which we initially wanted to go into the TFF, but unfortunately we couldn't do that.
So as you all know, we had a big meeting this last summer about children's mental health. And I will tell you, I sat on that public-private partnership meeting, the last one, and where you all presented information about all these really cool evidence-based services that are available in these pilot sites. These are exactly the kinds of services that children and families in Texas need to keep families together, to really provide that 24/7 home-based intensive services that a lot of children need. Children in CPS need them, children in juvenile justice need them, just in general, children with mental health needs need them. And so I'm really excited about this, and I cannot wait to look at the data. Because I know that they're doing high fidelity wraparound in one of the regions. They're doing trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, motivational interviewing. I mean, these are all evidence-based practices that we know work to provide support and assistance to children and families. So I'm just really excited about this. So thank you so much. This is really cool. So I just wanted to commend you guys for it. And like I said, I can't wait. I'm sure once the word gets out, you'll have referrals. I have no doubt.
Well, right now we probably have, the other part, why I say referrals, I think we also have some cases that are pending to go to court, to actually court. So we only try to count the ones that are active right now. So we have some cases that are pending.
Do we have any more questions for Mr. Green? Yes, in the back.
I had a question. You said you're having trouble getting referrals. Obviously, y'all are looking at pinpointing like what the glitch is. So do you have any thoughts on that? Like,
yeah,
is it just training or nobody knows about
Yeah,
it?
it's a twofold thing. I think the population it only come from investigations. So there are other you know, if we, for example, we were to refer families that were family reunification, for example, would be another population we'd love to see, but unfortunately, the language in the law only allows us to make those referrals from investigations to close an investigation. So the issue becomes whether or not we can assure child safety in that investigation. So if we have a case in which a parent is abusing a substance or something like that, and they need to have them supervised, so that we can give the case over to Texas Family First. Sometimes the family cannot come up with a person who can supervise 24/7, so we have to look at other ways to be a little bit more creative and how to do that, but still assure child safety to close that investigation. And so that sometimes becomes a barrier for us. The other barrier sometimes is that families, you know, while they would love to go through the program, some families do have some apprehension about going to court. And so those are other things in regards to how we engage those families, and we're working to really inform our families that it's, you know, court's not scary, it's really about oversight, it's making sure that we're accountable, families accountable, DFDS is accountable, and we're doing what we're supposed to do, and that's the reason why we want to go to court. So really it's about engagement and how we discuss this with families. And I just want to remind everyone, it's only 120 days, and so we're still working through that. And so we do hope that some of the issues that we're trying to put forward, that it can lead to more families going into this platform.
I do have a question. So you said you're having a hard time getting the referrals and you're only, due to the law, you can only refer those that are in the investigation stage. Is there a way we might can get that changed to where if they're in FBSS or even with a removal at the reunification stage, that we might can look at that in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I know that there are stakeholders in the community who are planning to reach out to the legislature to see if they can go ahead and change that section of language of the bill to allow for more families. I know that there's been discussion about allowing children in the juvenile justice system to go through it and things like that. So, you know, we're not going, of course, to lobby for that, but there are numbers of individuals in the community who are going to be reaching out to our legislature to see if they can open this up to more families, a different population.
So my concern is that in the investigation stage, that first 30, 45 days, parents are carrying a lot of anger and they're not trying to, some of them don't want to move past that anger where they can be open to working those services. And I feel like it's not really identifying the populations that would best be served.
And in that regard, I think our SSCC partners do a very good job of, when we do refer families, to your point, of explaining, you know, why this is different, almost in regards to just what they're going to get and how their services are going to be different, how, you know, by whatever danger or safety issue we've identified, how they're going to work in partner with that family to mitigate those dangers. So they do an excellent job of really getting families to buy in. And so we're all working collaboratively in this fight. So it's so far, I guess it's going good. The one thing that we want to do is just increase the numbers of families that are getting served.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank my colleagues, Ms. Abrahams and Mr. Green, for talking a little bit about how DFPS is working with families, doing some prevention work, working with families in kinship, working with families in home services. These are all our preferred methods to work with families, to serve the children and families that we work with. At times, they do have to be removed and come into custody, and we can work on the CPS side of things. And for my brief time with you, I just want to let you know that Stephanie and Erica Bonderos would love to have been here today. They had some other obligations, so you got me, and I'll do the best that I can. One of the things that keeps me up at night as the Deputy Associate Commissioner at CPS is foster care capacity. And another thing that keeps me up at night is the children without placement issue, which seems to garner quite a bit of attention from stakeholders, and it should. That also points to lack of capacity to treat folks with mental health issues. Sometimes they're caregivers, sometimes they're youth. And that is an ongoing issue across not just child welfare, but all populations. And it's kind of a symptom of a foster care capacity issue that I want to talk a little bit about today. But let me give you a briefing on where we are with children without placement within the last couple of months. In November, our average unique youth in child without placement was about 125. So that is down from July of 2022. At that point, we were at 250, so we reduced the average population by half. And to give you some more context, in July of 2021, our average was 400. So we're making some significant gains in reducing the census of youth in child without placement.
And how are you doing that?
I think that the biggest part of that gain was really sitting down and pouring more resources into where can we find placements for these youth. The other part was diagnosing what are their actual mental health needs in a very specific kind of way, and matching them with providers that could provide them the kind of support that they needed in the most least restrictive environment. As we continue to work through that through several weeks or months, actually, we were able to drop it from 400 to about 200. At 200, we were relatively stable for quite some time. We've recently got some gains down to the 125 number. And I think that's in large part due to some of the expert panel recommendations that's come from the federal litigation. They asked us to work more closely with HHSC, with the multidisciplinary interagency team. We were able to generate a team of 20 people, 19 clinicians, one director level person to be a clinical coordinator to work specifically with youth and child without placement. They also do the intense diagnosis, try to link them with the kinds of services that they need. They also try to find some other placements for those youth and then follow up with those youth for 90 days to make sure that the placement doesn't disrupt. Which leads me to another issue about youth in Child Watch that I want to share. We've recently done a data analysis. Ms. Fisher's shop has graciously given us some results that some of which we knew, but some of which we didn't know. We're able to segment the population. This is the most striking thing that I want to tell you. You already know that they're older youth. You already know that they're troubled youth. You already probably know that they come into Child Watch from unlicensed placements. They come from psychiatric hospitals. They come from juvenile justice. They come from runaway status. They come from kinship placements. Most of those are not what we would term the licensed placements. They're folks that are trying to deal with other issues, and the youth come into care. They have a history of runaway psychiatric hospitalization, as I said. They also have a history of aggression. They also have a history of self-harm. For these youth, about 64% of these current Child Watch census youth have a recidivism rate of 55% within 90 days. So they will leave Child Watch, they will go to a placement, or maybe they run away. They might even go to a psych hospital and then they come right back in. If we could do something with the recidivism rate, I think that we could make another great gain in our reduction of youth in Child Watch. So that leads me back again to the foster care capacity issue, because you've got to have some resources that can help folks to overcome the issues that they need help with. And so we were able to come across some funding, about $19 million appropriated from the legislature. And we were able to go out to our provider partners and award $18 million in foster care capacity grants. This is greatly going to help us to increase our resources to support all youth in care, but also some of these child watching. I believe we were able to increase our therapeutic foster homes by almost 2/3 of what we needed. I want to say, if I can look at my notes here very quickly, our therapeutic foster homes, we need about 300 therapeutic foster homes, and we got 175 through these granting efforts. So that was about 2/3 of what we were looking for. Therapeutic foster home can accommodate youth of this type of level of care, and they can do it in a family-like setting, which is, we think, the best for these youth. So we were able to expand the number of beds for youth in congregate care settings, which is not our preferred setting, but it is a setting that can handle youth at these levels of care. So that was going to be helpful too. We have one provider who wants to do a qualified residential treatment facility for us. So that's going to be helpful. If that comes online, we can have a throughput of 100 kids annually through there. So that will also help us. So we're very excited about these increases in foster care capacity. And I think that leads me very quickly to almost the end of my remarks. I know I'm about out of time. I can see Ms. Bernstein. Luckily, I turned my timer off, otherwise you'd be hearing the radar. Be quiet, rock, be quiet, rock. But before I finish, and I do want to take some questions about what I've talked about, but Ms. Manuelos asked me to be sure that while I was in the company of you folks to say, and this is a foster care litigation issue, it's one of our remedial orders to keep close track and document and record youth that are in the temporary managing conservator class and the permanent managing conservator class. We're doing the very best we can. We've hired some new staff at CPS to help us to keep up with that. You guys are doing a great job getting those orders to us so that we can document who's in the TMC class, who's in the PMC class. As they move through the court system, we need to continue to work with you. These new staff will work with your courts to try to get those orders timely so that we can get them into the record in impact, and we can demonstrate to the court that everybody is adequately identified. I think the court's issue is that in some cases we may have been undercounting the permanent management conservative class, so we want to be sure that we're staying on top of that. You guys have been doing a great job. Please spread the word to your peers that we'll be reaching out and trying to work with you more closely to get those orders as timely and complete as we can. Does anyone have any questions about foster care capacity? See what, well, really anything. I won't answer your question.
You wouldn't if you tried.
No doubt about that.
Well, I just want to thank you all for being such an active participant in this every time you come. And I say this every time, but it's true. You all take a lot of heat. You're often scapegoats. And I don't think that's really fair. And you have a really hard job, and we understand it and appreciate that you do everything you can to make the system better, to make it work. And, you know, just thank you so much for all you do. Okay. So now then, we're going to hear from our own Megan Lavoy with the Office of Court Administration.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm sorry I was late, running around a lot today. I'm sure all of you are as well. I just have a couple of things to touch base with you all on. One of the things is, so the introduced version of the budget was released a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that we were really excited about, a lot of times exceptional items aren't included in the introduced version of the budget, but OCA did get funding for a case level data system. We got more than $6 million to build a system that will intake case level data. I know I've talked to this commission about case level data before. I got a call this morning specifically related to some of the issues you're working on, but one of the senator's office called and they wanted to know if we could give them data on children that were in foster care that had truancy issues, and obviously our data is not that granular. I don't know if we will get that granular once we do get a case level data system, but it's going to be it's a big project, something that we've been working on for the past couple of years in looking at the national data standards. They're called NODS, and looking at all the elements that are in the national data standards and seeing what would be easy to collect here in Texas, and there's thousands of elements. So we're excited that we got funding for that, and looking to partner with the Children's Commission and other stakeholders on exactly what y'all are looking at and would want the judiciary to collect on that granular level. So we'll be having lots of discussions about that in the coming months and years. I think the legislature might expect that it's gonna happen like that, but it is a long-term project, but we're really excited that that we got support for that. So that's a big change that's coming. Another event that happened earlier last month, and I think I talked to you all about it, was the local rules website that was instituted by OCA on January 1st. By Supreme Court order. So the Supreme Court is no longer approving local rules, forms, and standing orders. They're all posted on OCA's website, and they have to be posted on that website to be effective. So I just looked this morning, we have over 1,100 already on the website. I've used it several times. I get judges or coordinators calling me looking for a model order or a model form, and the website is searchable, and so you can, I was looking at something for court reporters, and I just put court reporters, and there was dozens that came up, and I was able to send them some model orders. So take a look at that if you haven't. I think it's going to be really helpful for lawyers and judges and the public as well. So take a look at that. There's a link to that website on our home page. I also want to provide a brief update on where we are at in family law cases and the backlog. So family clearance rates continue to increase between March 2020 and November 2022. The statewide clearance rate reached 92%, which is up from 89% reported from March 2020 to February of 2022. Post-pandemic, what we're calling post-pandemic, between March of 2022 and November of 2022, statewide the clearance rate for family law cases was 95%. Between March 2020 and November 2022, the number of active pending cases decreased in family law cases to 49,665 cases. That's about 9% less than were pending before COVID. So we are working on that family law backlog. We, as you'll know, are in legislative session. We're tracking many bills related to child welfare, and we're happy to share those bill lists with you. If anybody's interested, feel free to reach out to me, and happy to answer any questions that y'all have.
Any questions? Thank you so much. We really do appreciate all your help, and certainly OCA is a model for the country, and we appreciate all your work very, very much. Okay, so now then we have glad of the council members. Some submitted some cards, and we're going to have about 2 to 3 minutes each to provide some updates. So I think we'll start with Tiffany Crouch Bartlett.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm the Legal Advocacy Projects Director for Texas Lawyers for Children. I work with Barbara Elias Percival, and we are working with Representative Mihaela Police's office on House Bill 1502. And it is a bill that would require trauma training for any attorney who represents the department in one of these child welfare cases filed by the state. So and also would require judges to engage in the same training. And it's going to mirror the current statute, which is 10704 B4, which was passed in the last legislative session. And we just wanted to get the word out about it. And any of you all who are able to support it and read about it, we would encourage you to do so. We'd also like to, again, express the online trauma training, 15 hours that's free and available to all attorneys and judges across the state. We've had, I think, over 1,100 participants so far, and it's been, we've gotten a lot of great feedback on it. It's a terrific training module, and we encourage everyone who can and who hasn't engaged in it to check into that. And anyway, we just want to reemphasize the importance of trauma training for everyone involved in children in the child welfare system in Texas. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any questions, Tiffany? Okay, and then we have Sarah Worthington, who is with the Texas Foster Youth Justice Project, Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid.
Thank you, and thank you for acknowledging our staffing transitions this morning. I just wanted to give a very brief update on what we're doing right now because we've had some transitions. As y'all know, I'm now our project director, very excited to move into this role. But with Mary Christine's transition also, we are down an attorney. And so right now we are still at limited capacity, but we have hired the lovely Lauren Santabanez here. I brought her with me so she can see this group. She is our project paralegal, so she's our front door. Anybody who calls will get to speak with her. We are doing new legal intakes. We're taking new cases. We've hit the ground running this year, not just taking cases, but also engaging in the data collection project that the commission so very generously funded for us. So we're collecting data with every person who calls, whether that is current or former foster youth or advocates or other attorneys. We're collecting data from everybody about what the legal needs are, what the status is of the services that they need. And we're going to be presenting that to y'all in some way in the next year, once we have that. And just as a brief refresher, because there are some new faces so that y'all know, we provide direct legal representation to youth who have been or are currently in foster care. If they are in foster care, you'll know they have an attorney already, or most have an attorney, but sometimes there are legal issues that are outside the practice of their attorney ad litem. We're happy to step into those areas. Sometimes they leave here and no longer have an attorney, but still need help, and we're there for them as well. We're not limited by age or geographic location. We're only limited by our capacity, which again is a little bit limited at the moment. I'll point out we don't work on criminal cases. We're not permitted for our LSC regulations, but pretty much anything else, if we can't help, we can provide advice, referrals. We take it very seriously to do everything we can for everybody who calls us. So as a part of that, we're also revamping some of our visual materials that are quite outdated. Our aging out guide that I know y'all are aware of in our website, the content on those are updated after each legislative session, but the visual identifiers have not been updated since we started about 15 years ago. So we are in the process of raising funds to completely revamp our website, create an integrated digital version of our guide into the website, as well as redesigning the guide and other materials. So putting that out there, thank you for your support. Please continue to send people who might need some assistance to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, does anybody else have anything else you'd like to share?
Well,
Sandra, you look like you're.
yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to remind y'all probably know, but just to remind you that we have our annual advanced child protection law course, March 23rd to 24th in Houston at the Hilton Post Oak in the Galleria area. It's a nice area of town. Really hope that you'll be there. The other event that we'll be having there is our first 101 course for new attorneys, which we're really excited about. We want to get new attorneys trained in this area and encourage them that this is an area that they'll enjoy. So if you know any young attorneys or maybe the old attorneys that want to do something different, please let them know about the 101 course. It's only half a day. We may make it longer in the future, but we're just trying it now as a half-day course. Children's Commission is supporting us and getting scholarships. However, the scholarship deadline, I hate to tell y'all, is over this coming Wednesday. So when you leave here, you immediately go to your attorney that needs to be doing this and tell them to go sign up for that scholarship so they can go. The Children's Commission is also going to help us with scholarships for the advanced course. And you don't have to be poor. You can apply for it and not be poor. But you do have to fill out a survey afterwards and, with a little bit of information about what you learned. So I would definitely encourage
any lawyers that you think have just not had opportunity for CLE training, child protection law, that are doing this area of practice, come. We have some great speakers. We have some great topics, some topics that I think are just so important for us to be talking about, like what does endangerment mean? I mean, I think that's a pretty good one. We know that the case law on that is getting kind of interesting. Well, I will also have one other event, sorry guys, one other event that we're really excited about. On Friday morning, we're gonna have a breakfast, and it's gonna be really early in the morning. It's like 7:30 in the morning, 7:30 to 8:30. So this is the people that are really committed, but I want to tell y'all, I went to a ABA thing, and they have stuff at early in the morning all the time. I mean, these State Bar people don't do it, but they do in the ABA, and that was where I got inspired about these early morning things. What I found in these early morning things is, you know, you think people can't think that early, but actually you can talk to them. And so it's, and we really want to, because we're going to talk about appellate representation. It's going to be a forum for that. We're going to talk about the needs that we have for appellate representation, how we can better get attorneys available for the courts in our state, because we have a need for good appellate representatives, and we need good training. We need to get started on a one-on-one course for that, for appeals for CPS lawyers. So, I mean, I'm excited about it. I think we haven't really gone there, and Justice Countess is in charge of our work group with the commission.
I don't know that I'm in charge. You're the one who got the breakfast set up, and I think you said you got it paid for?
Oh, yes, today. Today, I made an application to the appellate section, since it's a kind of appellate thing, for $2,500 toward the breakfast, and they just approved it today. So, and that's another thing, if you know anyone that would like to come to help support for the breakfast, we need, I know it's not gonna fully cover it, the $2,500, child protection and sexual help as much as they can, but you know, if you know any sponsors that would like to help for these events, let me know.
Thank you, Sandra. I really appreciate it. Okay, is there any new business other than what we've done? So if you all have any ideas, I thought that the program today was wonderful, really giving us a perspective that we don't often see, and certainly for the judges, I mean, it was wonderful, but really for all of us. So any ideas of things like that, because as you all know, we're really pushing to really make these meetings substantive, so that we can really use this time very efficiently to do as much as we can to improve the system. So let us know anything that you have in mind. And I want to thank the staff as always for doing a wonderful job. You all are so great. We appreciate you all very, very, very much. Busy. We're working now on standards for representation of parties and children in CPS cases. And so that's a big project. We'll be meeting again next Thursday and Friday. So we're going and blowing, but it's all good. And remember that we have our next meeting. Oh, and